But besides the magic wand, we also have another amazing tool called the quick selection tool. And let me show you how that works on this image with the balloon. So we've seen this before as well, but I'm going to do something different now. So right click on the magic wand, we can then select quick selection tool, which is a brush. And if you remember, we have shortcuts to increase and decrease brush sizes, either the square brackets on the keyboard or the other option, Control Alt click and drag on Mac or right click and drag on PC. So with that, we can increase, decrease brush size. And with this, all you need to do is to click and drag over the details you want to select, and see how nicely it finds similar colors immediately. And I just have to be careful not to select the sky. That's all I have to worry about here. And for the basket, I'm just going to reduce the size of my brush, because what you have to remember with the quick selection tool is that you shouldn't drag around the edges, because that will start selecting the background as well. So you should always keep your brush within the selection, within whatever you wanted to select. Okay, so avoid the edges, start always from the middle and work your way outside, but don't reach the edge, so you don't go over the edge with the brush. I am just going to zoom back and just show you that we could move this balloon already, or we could even duplicate it. If you remember with the move tool, if you hold down the Alt key, you can immediately duplicate a detail, because it's not on its own layer, it will be in the same layer. So we have two balloons now. But we could, of course, move this onto another image as well. So let me just drag it onto another document. This will be nice. Let's go. And there's the balloon. So I can then move it around, decide where I want it, or using the free transform tool, we could also make it smaller or bigger and do all kinds of different things. We can even have it in front of the castle or somewhere here in the foreground if we want, because we did quite a good selection. If I press enter, we can see it became a separate layer. So let's test this tool on another example. I'm going to select this image, and let's say we want to recolor the van, because it's a nice color, the current one, but let's say we want to make it a little bit more fun and have a bit more vibrant color on it. So let's test the quick selection tool in this example. Again, I have my tool selected from the toolbar, and then I just increase the brush size and start painting over the van, and you will see how nicely it will select everything. Now, if you accidentally select details that you didn't want to select, you can hold down the Alt key with this tool as well and remove from your selection. So Alt to subtract, and with the quick selection tool, by default, it automatically adds to your selection. So you don't have to hold down the Shift key in this case. So you just have to paint over the details you wish to include, something like that, a little bit more on this side, and that seems to be a good selection. Now I can also include this detail if I want, something like that, and hold down Alt if I went too far, or you can always undo your selection as well. So once you have the selection, then you can go to Image, Adjustments, and then we can choose Hue Saturation, which we used in a previous example with the signs. So I can now decide what color I want to use here, and I can also increase the saturation. But if you feel like the colors are getting a bit funny, then you can help the situation by turning on the colorize. Colorize will create a monochrome effect, so you will have just one single color replacing everything, and it will only keep the tonal differences, so the brightness differences on the selection. So we can create a nice blue van, or let's create something a bit more funky, maybe something like a stronger and darker green, like that. So if I click OK, I can deselect, and we can have a look and see how quick and easy that was. So if it's that easy to use Magic Wand or Quick Selection tool, why don't we use them all the time? Well, it's not always that easy, because it depends really on the image and the detail you want to select. So these two tools only work well when you have a well-isolated detail which has similar colors all around. And I have one last example here, which has also a detail I would like to change. So we have an amazing photograph of this carousel, But the only detail, once again, which I'm not that happy about, is the sky. It is quite flat and a little bit overexposed as well here on the left side. But it is working well as a photograph because it really gives a good backdrop and contrast to this colorful object and people in the foreground. So I'm not saying it's a bad photograph, but what if I want to replace the sky and add some more detail and interest in there? Now, in these cases, both the Magic Wand and the Quick Selection tool will give you a hard time making the selection because there are so many tiny little details. Plus, we have all these strings, and then in between the strings, we have also parts of the sky. So although it's one similar color, it is ranging from a very bright, almost white, to a darker and more vivid blue here on the top right. Plus, we have all these little details, which would make it very difficult to do this selection. Not to mention that we also have in the image other blue details on the carousel. So for these type of selections, what you can turn to is the color range option, which you will only be able to select from the select menu. So it's not a tool, it's more like a selection method or technique. But just like in other cases, I mentioned that combining selection tools usually gives you the best result. So I will show you another tool which we haven't used so far. It's an alternative version of the lasso tool called polygonal lasso tool. So once I select that one, what I want is first create a very quick and rough selection of the carousel itself. So we are not going to include this in our selection. And you can see with this tool, all you need to do is to click, 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 and basically connect the dots, go around the detail you want to select or you want to deselect in this case. So it is something that I am going to invert once I'm ready. So this is a detail I don't need in the selection at all, because the color range would pick up a lot of details from this carousel if we just include it into our selection. So that's why I'm going to make this quick selection around it. And then I can finish off my selection where I started, something like that. So once I zoom further out, you can see that we have this detail selected. But of course, we are after selecting the sky. So I'm going to go to Select, Inverse, and now the sky gets selected. Some details here in the foreground are still selected because I didn't bother making a selection around them manually with the polygonal lasso tool, but that should be fine because I can't really see much blue details in there. So now if I go to the select menu and choose color range, then we will get this dialog box. So it will show you the selection here in black and white, and then you see the image in the background. But I prefer to change this. I usually have the image here in the smaller thumbnail, and I have the selection preview set to grayscale. This grayscale view actually shows us exactly what's going to be selected and what's not selected. So black is not selected, and wherever you see white, those are the parts that will be included in the selection. Color range has a similar option to the tolerance for the Magic Wand. Increasing the fuzziness, we can include more colors, or decreasing it, we can include less colors. Now, fuzziness is usually good to keep around 50, 60, in my opinion. I think the default option here is 72. But I'm looking at the strings because I would like to keep the strings visible as much as possible. I'm going to reduce the fuzziness to around 60. And then maybe just once click here on the left side, holding down Shift to add those parts to the selection. Now, then I click OK, and we can see this is turned into a selection. So if we now unlock the background layer by clicking on the little lock icon and then press backspace, we deleted all these details. If we don't want these foreground details to be visible, we can just simply select the eraser tool and just delete them. So we can completely remove these. That way we will only have the carousel. And also here on the other side, just make sure we don't delete any of the people. And then we can just quickly delete these parts as well. But let's bring in another image behind this just so we can see what we achieved. I'm going to go to the last image and use the move tool, click and drag it onto the other tab, then hover over the image, let go, and then just move it underneath in the layer structure. And that way we can see our new background. So we can always move the clouds further up, something like that. Let's say this is how it would look from below. And it works pretty well. I mean, if we zoom closer, we can see that the strings are not 100% perfectly selected, but the color range still did a good job, considering that it was almost like an automated selection. So we didn't really have to work hard. I only did that selection with the polygonal lasso tool, but the rest was almost automated. So these were the 3 tools that we use when we can do selection based on color and contrast: the magic wand, the quick selection tool, and color range. And what I wanted to highlight in this video was also that combination of selection tools will always lead to a better selection result. But that's still not all that we can do in Photoshop to create selections. So in the next video, I'm going to give you a couple of even more advanced techniques. And we will also learn how to refine our selections.